You've joined me here today at the wonderful Horseshoe Lake in Lechlade, Gloucestershire. Well, it seems like spring is finally upon us after a long wet winter. There's glimpses of sunshine, there's a few carp showing, and today I'm going to have a look at giving you some of my top tips for the springtime. Now, it's easy to sort of think that the sun's coming out, the fish are waking up, you're just going to rock up and catch a load of fish, but let me tell you now, spring can be a tricky period of time to catch carp, without a doubt. But there are a few simple rules and regulations that I find that will help you catch lots of fish. So I'm going to get the rods back out, get a zig out, because there's a few fish showing, and talk you through some of my top tips to put more fish on the bank during springtime. One thing that has been massively evident in all my years fishing in spring is how vital a role the depth of water plays in my spring captures. Now, in my experience, if you've got deeper water, the fish spend a lot more time in the upper layers than they do closer to the bottom. Now, it makes total sense really, because in spring the water temperatures are cold, the sun comes out, the first place that is going to warm up is the upper layers. So it makes total sense that the carp are going to spend more time in the upper layers in deep water than they do down near the bottom. I would probably go as far as saying I have caught more fish on zigs in spring up in the water when it is deeper than I have done on the bottom. On a number of venues, linear fisheries, Lynch Hill, bluebells, 100% I've caught more on zigs. So one of my top tips for this time of year, if you haven't already, spend a lot of time with a marker float. Get to know the depths of the lake, so when you know where the fish are, you know what depth the lake is, and then it gives you a good starting point for fishing zigs. I've caught so many fish in sort of 12 foot of water on 10 foot zigs, so 2 foot down, that has always been a winner, and that would be like my starting point for a zigs. 2 foot below the surface in anything over 10 foot of water is always where I would start out. As always, you need to be prepared, and I always carry a zig disc or two with plenty of zigs pre-tied. Now, a lot of the venues I fish are between sort of 9 to 14 foot, so I pretty much tie all my zigs at 15 foot just in case. It's so much easier just to trim 2, 3, 4 foot off of a 15 foot zig rather than tie them all up at 8 foot and then you have to add a little bit more to it or start from scratch. So be prepared, go into spring with plenty of zigs tied up and make the most of those smaller feeding opportunities. Another reason why I think zigs are so effective in the spring is you'll notice all the fly hatches and the larvae coming up off the bottom. Now 100% that drives the fish absolutely wild, and they spend a lot of time up in the water, but also they're able to feed up in the water on all these fly hatches. So that's part of the reason why you see a lot of fish showing, and that's definitely one of the reasons why you'll catch a lot of fish on zigs in spring. One thing I've also noticed in the spring is that if you've got a lake that averages sort of deeper water of like 10 to 15 foot or even deeper, and it has shallower areas, the fish are definitely easier to catch in the shallow areas. But the thing you got to remember is they spend a lot more time in the deeper water, but soon as they move into those shallower waters, they're so much more easier to catch on the bottom over bait, and I'll always be keeping an eye on those areas, and the first sign of fish moving into those shallows, I'll always be trying to get in there. Quite often they're going to be in the corners or up a shallow end of the lake, and when they turn up, finding a spot and putting some bait in, I've caught so many fish from doing it, but they spend a lot less time in those sort of areas, but when they are there, you've got to make the most of it. With the water temperatures still being quite low during the spring, you need to fish a digestible bait when you are catching them on the bottom. So early part of spring, when the water temperature is still at its coldest coming out of winter, I still like to add some naturals into the mix, maggots, casters, that sort of thing, just to keep them grubbing around. But as the water temperatures tend to warm up just that little bit more, I still like to keep my bait nice and digestible, but I switch to sort of like more food items. Hemp, sweet corn, and a real digestible boilie is the way to go, like as the water starts to warm up. Sweet corn, you know, brilliant all year round, but in spring, highly visual, digestible, lot of attraction in there, a lot of sweetness, brilliant additive. Hemp, again, something that a carp can digest really easily and just keeps them grubbing around. And when they are feeding on it, they really root around on the bottom, polishing spots off and sort of making those spots better as the spring goes on. And then boilie. So again, the Pro-Stim liver boilie is my boilie of choice for a fair while now, since its testing stage and since it's been released. Nice soft bait, really, really digestible, full of like flavours and attraction, everything you want from a boilie. So yeah, maybe a few naturals in the mix early part of spring, but as it warms up, get some proper grub in there, get them feeding and make the most of it. So hook bait wise for springtime, I don't really change a lot. I work on the same key principles all year round. I want my hook bait to be the most attractive item in the swim. So I always use a Northern Special pop-up, nice and bright, visually the fish can home in on it. Secondly, I soak it in the awesome Halo liquid, which gives it mega attractive package of flavours that leak off. There's a slight oily twist to it as well, so that leaks off upwards. You get a bit of downwards leak off. Full of attraction, hook bait, most important thing in the swim, so you want it the most attractive. One of the most important things in spring is to get your location right. Now don't get me wrong, that applies to any time of year, but in springtime you really want to get that location right. And the sun's coming out, the fish are a lot more active, so I would definitely recommend spending that little bit extra time walking around the lake, searching areas that the fish haven't been in during the winter, because you know what, when it warms up, they may have sat out in the deep water all winter, but the second that sunshine comes out and that water temperature goes up a few degrees, the fish definitely start venturing into different areas looking for shallow water. So don't be really narrow-minded and set up in areas that they have been through the winter. Spend that extra little bit of time watching the water. They will show. You know, now that it warms up, there's always fish showing in spring and it's not too hard to find them. So don't neglect the areas that have been neglected for the previous few months and keep your eyes peeled. Well, in typical spring fashion, I've set up on showing fish, I've caught the first night, and then today it's been absolutely devoid out in front of me. I've not seen anything show whatsoever. So I guess that leads on to my last tip, and that is to just stay mobile. You know, don't be afraid to pack up and move. One thing I always believe when I'm carp fishing, and particularly in spring, they're not always easy to catch, but you've got to believe that there's always fish to be caught. So if you're not catching, you need to make it happen. You can't just sit there waiting for something to happen. If I could see fish anywhere, then I'm definitely going to move swims and get on them. As I said, there's always fish to be caught one way or another.